Okay, according to the screen, it is now live.
Okay.
So Mr. DePlacido, you can open the meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. We apologize for the late delay. We've had some issues here, but we want to thank you for joining us. This is Friday, November 13th, and it's a special school board meeting. And we'll open the meeting with roll call.
Mr. Bosco,
Here.
Ms. Capabianca,
Here.
Mr. Dean,
Here.
Mr. DePlacido,
Here.
Mr. Lindner,
Here.
Ms. McClintock,
Here.
Mr. Marabito. Okay, Mr. Marabito is absent today. Mr. Winchell,
Here.
Mrs. Winchell, Dr. Roberts,
Here.
and Attorney Senate.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 1.02, excuse me, approval of the agenda. I'll take a motion.
So move, Gary.
Second, Janine.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 1.03, Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. We'll say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
of
States,
the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands,
One
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice
with
for all.
liberty, justice for all. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Visitors, item 2.01. Any visitors would like to address the board this afternoon? Linda, anybody?
I am checking. I do not believe so. Just wanted to give one more second to make sure.
Okay.
Nope, no visitors.
Okay, great. Moving on, item 3, and the reason we're here this afternoon really is item 3.01, middle school teacher schedule adjustment. And Dr. Roberts, we'll let you take over.
Thank you, President Placido. Thank you all for convening. I will just provide a sort of a quick synopsis, then I would like to invite one of the critical members of our curriculum instruction team, Marianne Olet, to weigh in. And then we also have our secondary director of curriculum instruction, Dr. Tim Stoops, on. But board, the reason that we are here today is I want to share that, of course, as a reminder, we are navigating a school year, which is anything but normal. And one of the things that I remain committed to, and so does every member of our core executive team, is that we meet the needs of every stakeholder group, primarily our students, teachers and staff, and parents. To this end, we have continuously looked at and explored many options with regards to our virtual program and how teachers, staff, and school leaders are able to navigate our virtual model, so that we are being very cognizant of not just the instructional delivery model, but what decisions are we making to address the socio-emotional needs of our students primarily, and certainly our teachers. In terms of our middle school team, the central office and building level middle school administrators, as well as the core leadership team and our teachers, have looked at multiple options to sort of alleviate the pressure of virtual instruction at a middle level. We've explored options around collapsing. We've also looked at collapsing sections completely to have cross teams for students to generate room for more virtual sections. What I want to offer at this point is to invite Marianne Olet to share her capturing of a discussion that we have had around the 3 options for the board's consideration and ultimately for a decision. Marianne?
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Dr. Roberts mentioned the three options that we do have. The first one was collapsing rounds. I'll review that one first. The second is hiring for more content area coverage. And the third would be adjusting the daily schedule. Each one of these has benefits and challenges that we need to consider. But most importantly, the one thing that we keep most important in mind is the fact that what we know, especially from our experience from our K-5 and our 9-12, is that when we have teachers that are dedicated to our 100% virtual students, that is when those 100% virtual students are making the best strides in their instructional process. So having said that, with collapsing, what would happen there is we would go through and identify how many students are 100% virtual at the different schools, grade levels, and content areas to identify how we could push hybrid students into another classroom, freeing up that teacher who has the majority of the 100% virtual, freeing that teacher then to take on the role as the virtual teacher for example, 6th grade science. We would identify which middle school had the most 100% virtual going and really play the numbers game to see where that would fall. By utilizing our own teachers, by collapsing, it would come at no cost. But that's one of the benefits. One of the challenges is, of course, rearranging student schedules, pushing students in with a new teacher, increasing numbers in the hybrid situation, and definitely limiting or eliminating the possibility of future full return. So something there to think about. Let me see here, make sure that I had, the other thing that wouldn't happen is that wouldn't answer any questions when it comes to our encore teachers. That's something we would look at for our core areas. That would be English language arts, math, science, and social studies. The second option that we discussed would be hiring for our core content areas. Currently, we're looking at the plan that would hire a math teacher for 7th and 8th grade. That's something that had been discussed previously because of the big challenges our 7th and 8th grade teachers have. 7th and 8th grade teachers currently are planning for 3 different math courses, and we know that that was something that had been discussed previously. We would add on to that science grade 7-8 teacher, a social studies grade 7-8 teacher, an English language arts grade 7-8 teacher, and then a grade 6 ELA science and math teacher. When we're looking at the numbers, we have approximately 80 100% virtual students across our district in middle school for 6th grade. We have approximately 90 at 7th grade and 103 at 8th grade. And so for our grade 7-8 virtual teachers, that would be about 193 students they would be responsible for. When we come down to 6th grade, it would be 80 students that teacher would be responsible for teaching ELA, science, and math. We currently have a MTSD teacher who's doing the 6th grade social studies. If we were to do that just for the remainder of the year, using 130 days as our number, it would be about $270,000. Probably higher than that, because once they reach that 45-day threshold, they then are added on to the teacher's first year salary. The benefit is they would have a teacher, the 100% virtual students would have a teacher dedicated to them in their instructional needs. Again, one of the challenges, it does not account for the encore teachers, but positive, it would allow, if you were looking in the future for a full return, it would allow for that because the numbers would not be altered in the hybrid. The third option would be adjusting the school schedule. This would be done by removing that homeroom tutorial, similar to what was done at the high school. This would have no cost to the district, but there would certainly be adjustments that would happen. Again, the benefit would be that those teachers that those classroom teachers and those encore teachers would then have, instead of a homeroom tutorial, time to work with and focus on those 100% tutorials or virtual students. That's the benefit of freeing them up during that time. There is a family impact because those students would be coming home earlier. Transportation would need to be adjusted. Tutorial time would be eliminated. And that would create a barrier for intervention and most especially for our special ed population. So as those three, there isn't one that is the best answer for all of our needs going across the board. If you're looking for an answer that has the least amount of financial impact, the adjustment of our schedule works. But what I can say is that all three of them are focused on making sure that our students who are 100% virtual do have a teacher dedicated to focusing on just them for a period of time, depending on which scenario you go with. Do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you for all of that explanation. In reference to the first option, which was collapsing, one of the challenges was that that option eliminates the ability to return to school, and I don't understand how that would work.
And I said limits or eliminates. It really is going to be according to the numbers, because if you have sixth grade social studies in the building where that teacher is taken out. So if that teacher is removed and you have, let's say you have 100 sixth graders at J.S. Wilson, and so 25 of them they're split across that sixth grade. We can move them. We remove the hybrids. We remove the virtual students. We still have enough room with a hybrid to socially distance them. But as soon as we have everybody come back on the same day, we don't have that same amount of room because we don't have a class. We don't have that classroom for them. It's more students. It could be more students than we can fit in one room. So that would be one of the things we would have to consider. Dr. Stoops, can you help me out there?
Yeah, absolutely. That first option, as Marianne just rightfully noted, does interact differently with if the return to school were to be the case, because we would then be looking at one of the teachers would be assigned the virtual, but the numbers would be too large to support the full coming back to school. So
I guess I don't understand how that works.
Okay. So if you took, like, say, for example, 2 8th grade teachers at one of our middle schools, let's just say Westlake, 2 8th grade science teachers, and one of them were to be assigned to do the virtual piece of it, and then their students that are hybrid would then in turn go to the other teacher. But in a full return, all the students would be assigned to that one particular teacher. That would make it very cumbersome with the amount of students, social distancing, or the amount of students that we would be permitted. We would have to look at what the implications of that would look like. So
I'm sorry, the number of students that we would be permitted. I mean, and we're getting beyond the scope of this particular discussion, I think.
Right.
Okay.
Talking about social distancing, we've had that's a discussion the board would have, whether or not we would adhere to the 6 feet or go to the 3 feet.
Yeah, Janine, you're absolutely correct. There are implications if you choose that option number 1 for a full scale return. That becomes problematic.
But it does not eliminate the possibility.
No,
And that's why I said limit or could. And for example, if we had 20 students right now in each of those 8th grades that Dr. Stoops had said, and 10 of those students come on A day and 10 of those students come on B day, but you eliminate that other classroom. So then we're going to take that other classroom's 10 on A day and 10 on B day and push them in. All told, we're now going to have 40 children who have to be in that room when we have full return.
If the virtual numbers don't increase.
Don't increase or
Correct.
adjust. And so that's just, I guess I wanted to put that on there because I didn't want the decision to only look at what is going to happen from now until tomorrow, but like more long range plan. And I didn't want you to make a decision that in a few months that you go, well, wait a minute, had we known? So I just really wanted to bring up the fact that we are looking forward as well.
So these options, we should look at them as not a short-term option, a limited like 5-week option, but a long-term option.
I think because nobody really knows where things are going. And I think that the number of virtual students are changing every day, both ways. We have students are coming back to hybrid, and we have students that are going virtual.
So to that end, Janine, that is what makes it very difficult, because we do see kids that we had, if you look at the variance in our numbers between what were to go cyber and what were to go virtual, in just the context of this quarter alone, the swing is over 400 students. So it makes it very difficult to ascertain where parents may be, because we get daily requests for students to change their status, whether it's virtual to hybrid, hybrid to virtual. So that, to quantify that makes it really difficult, because things are constantly evolving, either one way or the other.
I totally understand that. I was looking on that last question as far as a short-term versus long-term option really refers back to a conversation that the board had earlier. So thank you very much.
And I think that just to go back to the collapsing, noting the fact that it does not talk about Encore. So all of the Encore teachers would still have the obligation of taking care of those virtual students as well as their hybrid students.
And so when we're talking about Encore, we're talking about gym, tech ed.
Tech ed, F&C science, computer science, art.
Okay, thank you.
In talking about the first option, collapsing, is that comparable to what is happening at K through 5?
It's not really, Mrs. Winchell. I think in probably 2 places that might have happened, but in most places we did make a hire of a teacher to do that. Where it could have happened, we did do it. And in some places it couldn't happen, so we ended up hiring teachers to do that.
Okay, but I want to emphasize that when we return to 4 days, and I'm hopeful that that will happen at some point, when we return to 4 days, we are still going to have virtual students. And so I'm thinking of this as a more long-term solution than a short-term solution. If we, for example, collapse sections and have a person who is dedicated to 6th grade science, we are still going to need that 6th grade science teacher for virtual. And the number of students that come into the building will be a smaller number. I think you're right. We are going to have to do some juggling and making it work. And no one can predict what those numbers are right now.
Correct.
But that first option to me seems like a transition option and a get ready to go back to 4 days a week option. Because I don't think just through this year, I think virtual is going to be an option that we continue on forever, yes. Because I think it's something that parents are going to find fits in with their schedule best. And so the collapsing is at no cost, that's correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I guess I would say no cost until and when you decide that it is a full return, and if we can place our students in classrooms in a safe way.
Yes, right. To look at those virtual and to
biggest
look at
challenge.
The numbers in place. Shirley, you're exactly right, and I think that's a very prudent point to make regarding what is the long-term viability of the virtual scenario, because I think that's absolutely something we're hearing already from a lot of parents and from students directly.
I do want to make the call though for equity and the discussion about why how we're doing this. we just still have those encore teachers who would still be responsible for both groups of students with the collapsing. I don't know about it ever being how we would ever rearrange a schedule to have an encore teacher to have, to meet the virtual needs of students. So the encore wouldn't be a part of this plan.
Thank you, Marianne and Tim. So essentially, again, this is a short-term solution or option that certainly has long-term implications. And and I echo exactly what I think every person who just responded is saying, and that is one, not only do we not have an accurate prediction of where we're going to be in a couple of months, but our goal is to get back to increase full-time face-to-face learning for our students. But at this time, what we're seeking to do is to find relief for our middle school teachers who certainly deserve to have that relief, as well as to maintain the instructional program for students. The other options, questions?
I have some questions. I have a concern with option 3, where we were eliminating tutorial. I know my son has an IEP, and that time period was crucial for him. And it was when, in fact, he could actually, talk one-on-one with his teacher or get extra help or have makeup. I'm concerned about eliminating that, what that would do for not only IEP students, but a number of students. And I'd like to hear your opinion on how that would be a better solution as opposed to the other two. I understand financially it is, but how eliminating that tutorial, who it would serve other than the teachers would allow them more time. Tell me if there would be sacrifices for the students or the parents. I guess I'll direct it to Marianne or Tim.
Yeah. Go ahead, Marianne.
I guess I agree with what you're stating. There's no denying the fact that the students are missing out on that tutorial time. Not only are some of our students with need, in your case, your son, but I do believe that having our teachers freed up during that time to focus in on our virtual students is a benefit to our virtual students. So in that vein, I do think that this plan is a strong possibility, because I don't see it as teachers sitting at their desk planning. I see it as teachers sitting at their desk communicating with those students, however that communication might be. And some of the examples that I've, through conversations with teachers, is simply being able to answer some of those emails that are coming throughout the day and not being able to get to them. Now, that would be a designated time that they could do that. And so I do see this as benefiting those virtual students. But I have to agree with you that it is taking away that tutorial time.
I agree, Lisa, and I think that that's something we're going to have to look at very carefully via conversation with the case managers, particular to those students and to the IEP team specifically, that we are going to have to make adjustments that are going to have to be in place for that scaffold of support that normally is during that afternoon time slot. I really agree with that. We've acknowledged that, and that's something we're going to have to really begin that dialogue with Dr. Nine-Temp and with the supervisors of special ed, because we certainly want to pay attention to that. Our attempt is not to marginalize or to be indifferent. We're trying to make a plausible solution that's going to work out for all students. But I understand and respect that concern, and we are already undertaking dialogue to make sure that will meet the student need accordingly. And that, no question about it. Thank you for bringing that up.
One of my concerns is,
please keep in mind that during that time, teachers will also have an opportunity to either Zoom or Google Meet with students, all of our students, including students with IEPs. That will be an expectation that will come from Dr. Nine-Temp and his team.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I know a lot of people have talked about, easing the burden on the teacher. I'm not sure the elimination of the tutorial or elimination the issue for all the stakeholders. I mean, we're basically transferring it to the parents and to the students. So we're not really eliminating the issue. We're just kind of transferring it somewhat. And I think maybe one of the other two options, they can still maintain a tutorial and still receive more dedicated instruction. So I'm not so sure by eliminating tutorial really solves the problem. I think it shifts it, and it affects one, but maybe it totally affects the other group as well.
And I agree with Gary. One of the things that we were told previously was teachers might use this time to make other instructional videos for their virtual students, which I understand the need for that. But now we're saying, oh, they're going to take tutorial time and spend it with the virtual students, not giving the in-person students that time that day. So we had talked about the high school has more of a, not so much of a tutorial, but a study hall type period where they're in the building. They have the opportunity to go to teachers if they need to. We were told that the tutorial isn't taken advantage of as much at the middle school. And if that's true, having the kids in the building, not disrupting their entire schedule by bringing them home early, and their parent schedule, allowing them to remain in the building. If they're not utilizing it, okay, but if they do need the extra help, whether they have an IEP or they are just a student that needs to ask a teacher a question, why that teacher can't answer their question. And since it appears they're going to be answering questions for the virtual students, I mean, we're not going to have a two-tier system here, one for virtual, one for in person. I don't know why we're making that distinction right now.
I guess I didn't mean to isolate their attention just on those virtual students. I think that part of the challenge of being a hybrid teacher is not being able to get to those questions during the day when they have students in front of them who they want to give 100% of their attention to. I don't think there are any of our teachers that could ever separate themselves out that way. And a lot of those instructional videos that you mentioned that they might be making during that time, or modules that they're putting together, often play dual roles, those that are going for their hybrid students and those that are going for the virtual students. I think that what might happen during that time, if this is the option that is chosen, that is certainly something that needs to be discussed with the teachers of how that time is utilized. I think that if this is the avenue you decide to go down, that would be the strongest recommendation, is to make sure that there are some expectations of what is happening during that time. I think that too would make all stakeholders feel better about the decision that's made.
We talk a lot about how we can provide relief to our teachers. So, and I know we're talking about stakeholders, but option one is collapsing. And option two has hiring teachers. So that obviously is a long-term solution that's not going to happen instantaneously. What are we talking for the collapsing process? How quickly can that happen? And what is the turnaround on that? Because while we want to provide relief for our teachers, we also need to keep in mind that in-person instruction is the most valuable time for our students. Even if it's not always being utilized, it's still an opportunity for my student to stand up, go up and ask a question and get a person face-to-face answer. We also have to consider our students, they're zoomed out. I mean, there is Zoom fatigue. I know from a professional level, we get tired, they get tired. And to have that one-on-one interaction, it's tough for me to understand why we would willingly give that away when there are other options. And I know that option one, if, as you said, Marianne and Tim, that our numbers don't work, is going to force us into option two. But I'm curious as to what that time frame is for how soon can we make this relief for our teachers while providing a benefit to our students, and maybe bridging that gap if we end up having to hire any number of those teachers that you say are required in option two.
Yeah, I can address that partially. And Dr. Roberts, I don't want to speak for you, but I think, Mike, to answer your question, we could certainly be very aggressive with that. We've already begun the process the second quarter, so we can accomplish that. I mean, much sooner than later. We start tackling that by Monday and start looking at numbers and start looking at feasibility and start putting that action plan in place. I mean, working out the details with the classrooms, looking at the configuration, looking at the specific numbers, doing everything that needs to be done from an internal standpoint to make sure that gets done as quickly as possible.
And again, this option, yeah, thank you, Tim. This option starts with, again, first asking for volunteers. So this is not an option that will result in some immediacy. It's going to take us a few weeks to get this done. and predictably after the Thanksgiving holiday. And so I think one of the things that we're highlighting is, as much as we are certainly committed to ensuring all stakeholder groups, especially the three that we mentioned, teachers, students, and parents, are benefiting, what is being prioritized at this time is how do we provide some relief to teachers, given all of the data that we have with regards to teacher strain, number of hours working right now, as well as the conditions under which this is happening. So again, I certainly appreciate that question, Mike. We can certainly be aggressive, to Tim's point, but this is not likely to be erected within the next couple of weeks.
So Dr. Roberts, we have
a follow-up to that, if you don't mind, Jason. What is the timetable on option 3? When we talk about transportation and changes, well, how fast are we, so that we are looking at a timeline that we understand what those time differentials are?
I would think that we would have to have Bob from transportation to give us some idea about how long it would take to replan the transportation for that, because I think that's the only part of this planning. The additional part of it would be working with the administrative teams and the teachers at each building on how that time would be utilized.
Thank you, Marianne. That's a much faster option. I think having the adjustments with collaboration with the transportation team and Erin O'Toole made is not that burdensome.
I would like to say that, my opinion on all this is that we have taken away so much from our students. I just don't see how we can also take away a tutorial time that could be valuable to them. And in fact, all we've given teachers is a few minutes in order to plan more. I think that by going the route of collapsing, what you've done is you have actually decreased their workload because they're responsible for less students. And that is a more effective way to alleviate the workload. I think teachers are at the end of their rope, and I don't think anyone would disagree that they are not pushing to the max. That's not the problem. It's just, what is the solution that will truly be effective in helping them to not be so overwhelmed by this unreasonable workload?
I think this all came on, at least for me, pretty quickly, and this is a major decision, and I don't think as a board member I quite understand what the teachers are going through or the level of instruction. Like I understood Monday was like a virtual day for them to get caught up and them to do what they need to do, so they had that full day. And then I guess I just need to understand why the teachers are at the middle school level feel so burdened with it. And because the instruction that I'm seeing, at least for my student, it's not, I was under the impression like there would be more live streaming, and will that help once we get cameras to ease the burden on teachers, that they will have actually more live instruction? Is that all part of this process and solution? Does that play into effect? Because it doesn't seem like they're just getting more assignments now.
I think there's two things to look at there. Coming back to your original question, Lisa, the part of the reason for the angst and the frustration and where this is going from is the initial virtual numbers at the secondary level, 6 to 12, were not very high. And as students began to look at different options and parents began to look at options, maybe less generated from, like going from a different outside cyber provider like Kaola, or one of the other providers, PA Virtual, one of the other private schools, or that are out there, one of the cyber charter schools. Once that flock to Mill Creek's virtual came, the numbers really increased, and they increased dramatically. So where teachers were initially to start the school year were maybe dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4 virtual students, suddenly that number increased to 15, 18, 21, 23, or whatever the case may be. The manageability of that obviously is far different from the smaller numbers that were at the start, and even to some extent through the midpoint of the school year, no question about it. So your second part of that is the investment in technology. How does that make a difference? Definitely the purchase of the IPVO document cameras, and they can be used for in addition for other things other than document, is really going to enhance that. The professional development expectation, we've quantified that by looking at the amount of teachers that have trained other teachers, or looking at the amount of teachers that have invested in professional development experiences or vetted more online resources, done things like that. I think we've come leaps and bounds on the online instruction piece, no question about it, post March 13th. But I think that we need to look at, to your point, I think it's really imperative that we start looking at what are those best instructional practices moving forward, because to Mrs. Winchell's point, hey, we're in this virtual learning for the long haul. We want to make sure that we have crafted a distance learning scaffold, and we have it benchmarked to what the research says works. More importantly, what is directly benefiting them in terms of achievement and learning. So I think that that answer can be quantified with your question with the cameras, that we can see definitely more strategies being used by the teachers, more support given from our department and from the admin at large.
Thank you, Tim.
And I think, I'm sorry, Dr. Roberts, I think as time goes on, we do see a comfort level in our teachers as they become more and more comfortable with managing the workflow and how to introduce that to their students, utilizing the technology that's out there.
Thank you, Marianne. And additional questions from board members?
So Dr. Roberts, we have a survey out right now for 6 through 8 with the number of students that are going to come back. Right now, it looks like we have somewhere between 15 and 20% of our students are virtual. So for that to be a wash, we need closer to 50%. We would need closer to 50% for option 1 to be viable. Would it be appropriate to look at that survey and in parallel try to get an idea of how many teachers would like to actually virtually teach if we went with option 1 to collapse, maybe a target date of November 30th after Thanksgiving, and then that would give a month between, actually about 5 weeks between November 30th and the beginning of the year, that if we had to fill the gap for those teachers and blend into option 2 where we had to supplement, because as Marianne said earlier, we can't fit them all into the room. The timeline to me seems like that would be reasonable. So November 30th, we would try to get a collapse if that's the way the board wanted to go. And then by January 4th, if we had to supplement those virtual teachers with additional teachers, we could hire within those 5 weeks. That's something that would be a consideration or a potential plan? Or
yeah. Thank you, Mr. Dean. So absolutely, it certainly can be a consideration, especially the point of looking at the data, and we're likely to have that data, which will be interpreted over the weekend and shared with the board at some point next week. But my only concern is that it extends the time. The timeline that you mentioned just extends a solution, the timeline of a solution for teachers. Again, I want to make it elusively clear that while I recognize that we have to make sure we are prioritizing what is best for students, and similar to the sentiments that board members shared, I still believe that we ought to be in a place where we're adding more to our students and not taking anything else away from them. But our teachers, especially the teachers at the middle school level, have been asking for relief. We've had these conversations for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And it's a struggle for me knowing that, again, regardless of what solution we land on, if we can land on one today, that we're pushing this time further away without granting them some reprieve. But I really appreciate that sharing that we should, after we look at the middle school data, the 6-8 data from the surveys, we will certainly inform probably a much more long-term solution.
So between now and November 30th, we have 5.5 in-person days. So excluding, we have 1 full week next week, and then we have 1.5 days on Thanksgiving week. So 2 Mondays in there only gives 5.5 in-person days if we are to execute a plan on November 30th. And we probably couldn't even eliminate tutorial before then if we wanted to, correct?
It's possible, we can, yes. Eliminating tutorial before the 30th of November?
Saying depending upon what option we picked, either option one, collapsing, option two, we certainly couldn't do that quick because we have to hire people. And option three would be eliminating the tutorial. Would we be able to get either of those options implemented by November 30th?
I believe that we can. We've been talking a lot about, especially option three. Option two, again, in response to Mr. Linder's point earlier, would require, and to Tim Stoops' response, it will require an aggressive approach to try to fill option one with the collapsing. It's doable. Not sure it's doable within a week. I think the most immediate is probably the relief by eliminating tutorial. But I certainly hear the concern around the impact on students. And so that gives me pause as well.
Thank you.
President Placido?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Are we ready to proceed with the motion? I mean, we've had a lot of discussion here, but if we're going to do something, we're going to have a motion.
I'll make a motion for option.
I'll second that motion.
I'm sorry, can we repeat it? I didn't hear it.
I made a motion for option one, which was collapsing.
Okay, and we have a second?
Correct.
Mr. Linder?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, let's have a discussion.
I understand the three options, I think, pretty well. I understand our teachers need relief. I believe how this has been explained to me, they can obtain that with option one, as well as leaving that tutorial time in place for all students to be able to reach their teachers, which I really feel important. Whether we change that and it's more of a study hall like it is at the high school, but having that time there, and since I have a hard time believing it would just be a short-term fix eliminating the tutorial, which I am very concerned with. I know both my children have used it and the teachers have always been so responsive during that period. So that's my reason, as well as positioning us to move from the hybrid to a 4-day-a-week period, having those virtual teachers in place, which is my reason for opting for option one.
I would agree with you,
okay,
Janine. I think that if you are aimed at the goal of relieving the overload of teachers, an effective way of doing that is having the virtual students be the sole responsibility of a virtual teacher. And I think that having their sole focus on virtual and the classroom teacher's sole focus on the A students and the B students, I think it will alleviate workload and it will enhance what we are able to offer to students.
And I would like to just
any other
that, and to also comment on Jason's point. We have 2 weeks till we're at our Thanksgiving break. And realistically, if we are looking into December, and we're looking at December 7th, that's 3 weeks for us to make that change. We're asking teachers, we hear you need relief. We're saying we can provide relief theoretically within 2 weeks. I would rather make a long-term solution that might take an extra week or two, but is a more positive solution for everyone involved. But I think we need to be open that option one may force us to require option two as well when we come back to 4-day-a-week if we get there.
Well, I agree. I don't think anything we do at this point is going to be considered permanent. I think it's the best decision that with the information we have at the moment. And I agree. I think this particular option is the one that nothing's perfect, but for me it works mostly because of keeping that time at the end of the day. So that's my opinion. But any other discussion on that?
So we do this for K through 5. Maybe I'm not sure. I didn't see if Mr. Orlando was on here, but has it worked out for K through 5? Marion, I don't know if you know that. And how many teachers did we actually hire for K through 5? I mean, that's the model we're basically looking at.
I don't have the exact numbers of how many we collapsed versus how many we hired. Of course, Mr. Orlando could answer that better. I could ask him to jump on if you'd like me to have him do that.
I'm not sure. There are very different needs at the K5 versus the 6-8 level. One of the big considerations, again, was the fact that, again, students at the middle school level will have to change or jump teams. And so, yep, I think it will look very different at K5 versus 6-8 levels. So, yeah.
Just the fundamental concept of getting the virtuals out of the day-to-day, face-to-face teacher is what I'm considering, Dr. Roberts.
Makes sense. Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
And that did make a large difference. And I think that was part of what I heard Mrs. McClintock, Attorney McClintock share, the fact that we aren't hearing as much from our elementary teachers because they are focusing in on their students who are hybrid. Because the virtual students are with the 100% virtual teachers. I think that's the difference between elementary and middle school. And that's what, that's the difference between what would happen with option 1 if we went that route, or even option 2. Option 3 still keeps that classroom teacher with her or his same students and still responsible for both populations, hybrid and 100% virtual.
So can I ask a question then too? So what is the general consensus among the administration as far as what would make the most sense for this? And I'm still calling it a short-term solution because things keep changing, or to be, okay, why don't I say the most adaptable solution? Would that be 3, which allows us more to pivot when things constantly change?
Yeah, so the discussion and agreement, if you may, between the administration and our teachers was option 3. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Just a gentle reminder again that your option 1 still does not address those teachers from those encore. And I just don't want to lose sight of them.
I do want to mention, though, as a follow-up to that remark, the encore teachers are in a different position. They teach a 9-week course, and then they repeat that 9-week course 3 more times. The core teachers are teaching all 36 of those weeks different lessons. And so their preparation is already different based on what they're teaching.
Absolutely. I agree with you there.
Anything else? Okay, why don't we take a roll call? Linda?
Could you repeat the motion, please?
The motion is to approve option 1, which is collapsing rounds.
Thank you.
Mr. De Placido.
Yes.
Mr. Lindner.
Yes.
Ms. McClintock.
Yes.
Mr. Marabito is absent. Mr. Winchell.
Yes.
Mrs. Winchell.
Yes.
Mr. Busco.
I believe he had to jump off the meeting for a customer service call.
Okay. Ms. Capabianca.
No.
I'm sorry, was that a yes or no?
That was a no.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dean.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, great. I want to thank everybody for the tremendous amount of work that went into this decision. And again, I'm sure we'll be revisiting down the road, but for now we have what we need. We had the information and we made a call. So I want to thank everybody for all their time and effort in trying to give the board the best decisions that we could vote on. So thank you again.
President DePlacido, as a follow-up to that, can Dr. Roberts and the core team look at how this is going to blend together with a potential January 4th 4-day a week back in person, and maybe come back at the next board meeting and tell us how that would look when these surveys come through? And maybe it's just an email or something like that, but just so we're not caught flat-footed here December 15th, where we realize that we need 5 additional teachers if we do go full-time.
Clarifying. Thank you, Mr. Dean, for that.
Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. So how will the selection of option 1, the collapsing, blend with our possible return to full-time instruction 4 days a week?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Moving on, in the meeting, 4 old business, 5 new business, nothing remarks. Any board remarks?
I certainly want to thank the board for your thoughtful deliberation, especially as you consider the impact on each of those 3 stakeholder groups. Certainly, during this time, we have seen the trend whereby the decisions that we make will never be favorable to everyone. And so I think making decisions with the majority of the best information available at the time is the direction that we have to go in. Certainly, I know that our teachers will certainly hear our continued commitment to make sure that we're supporting them, that we want to continue to provide relief to them, and that as always that we see and hear them, and we're here to be supportive.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion, Dean.
Second, Janine.